In the beginning, we called it luck. While the world counted down to the first step on the moon, the Apollo mission astronauts discovered we weren't alone in the void. On the far side of the satellite, floating in absolute silence, rested the first needle. Humanity believed it had inherited the universe. There were no inscriptions, no instruction manuals, just colossal machines that folded space-time with the indifference of an ocean. We called them needles. In our rush for expansion and resources, we didn't stop to ask who had paved the way or why the network was open. We learned to sing the right frequencies and input the jump sequences, moving entire colonies across abysses that light would take millennia to cross. We became parasites of an ancient technology, kings of an empire built on foundations we didn't understand. And like any child playing with adult tools, we forgot that every road has an end, and that not every destination is friendly. Elias belonged to the third generation of vacuum workers. For him, the cosmos wasn't a mystery to unravel, but a shift to clock in. The ship, Sisyphus, was his world, a tangle of steel, synthetic oil, and exposed wiring that smelled of recycled metal and sweat. The procedure was mechanical, a routine of checks repeated thousands of times by thousands of men like him. The crew didn't talk about the grandeur of the jump. They talked about the families left behind in mining colonies and the taste of food after 6 months of hibernation. They trusted the needle's syntax like a sailor trusts the tide. But the needles are machines of absolute precision, and the human mind is prone to noise. A decimal deviation, a frequency slightly out of phase. At the moment of firing, the Sisyphus didn't cut through space. It was swallowed by it. There was no explosion. There was only a silence that shouldn't exist, and a distortion in the light that made Elias realize, for a brief second, that the road beneath his feet had ended. The Sisyphus didn't reach its destination. It fell into a dead spot on the map. There wasn't supposed to be anything there. According to the star charts, Elias should have been floating in a dead point of the universe, an abyss without stars or hope. But what appeared before his viewport seemed like an impossible miracle. A makeshift space station, a Frankenstein of steel kept alive by hundreds of ships welded together. On the radio, a woman's voice broke the vacuum's silence. It wasn't an official command. It was a technical lament. She explained what the flight manuals omitted. The needles failed. Dozens of ships were lost every year in the darkness, swallowed by syntax errors that corporations preferred to hush up. To the executives in their Earth offices, Elias and his crew weren't lost explorers. They were just numbers on a spreadsheet of acceptable losses. Upon docking, he was greeted by Elena, and behind her, he saw the extent of the abandonment. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of people, men and women disconnected from the world, but refusing to fade away. The atmosphere in the Nexus was one of dense sadness, a fog of longing that never lifted. There were people who had been there for months, and others whose uniforms from decades ago were already frayed and patched. They were biological ghosts, surviving on scraps and stubbornness. But somehow they endured. At the end of the universe, where corporate profits didn't reach, what remained was human persistence, one caring for another, simply because no one else would. In Elena's arms, he found a kind of comfort he thought he'd left behind. Amid the wreckage of forgotten ships, they built a sanctuary of flesh and bone. Her touch was real. The warmth of her skin was the only proof he was still alive. For the first time, the void outside didn't seem so hungry. But it didn't take long for the first cracks to appear on the surface of that new life. Time began to behave strangely. Elias noticed it first in the others. A young engineer he'd talked to yesterday now sported white hair and trembling hands. He saw Elena's face change under the flickering station lights. Small wrinkles that shouldn't be there. A weariness that seemed to accelerate with each sleep cycle. The home was withering. Elias realized, with a cold horror, the time there wasn't passing. It was being devoured. The comfort he'd found wasn't a fresh start. It was just a sedative. A way to keep his mind at peace while something dark and silent happened to his body. Elias's panic overflowed on a night that seemed to last decades. He confronted Elena in a corridor where the metal walls pulsed with an organic warmth he'd never noticed. He grabbed her shoulders, demanding the truth, shouting the names of crew members who had aged and died before his eyes in a matter of days. He didn't want comfort anymore. He wanted the pain of reality. Elena didn't shout back. She just looked at him with infinite sadness, as real tears streamed down a face that now seemed much older than the day they met. With a choked voice, she whispered that the truth was a cold the human mind wasn't designed to withstand. "You're not ready, Elias," she said, touching his forehead with desperate gentleness. At the moment of touch, the world around Elias began to disintegrate. The smell of coffee, the warmth of her skin, and the sound of voices in the station were replaced by a deafening electronic hum. The glass dome had shattered. Elias awoke in the sterile light of the laboratory. The station's warmth had been replaced by a metallic cold that seemed to pierce his bones. Around him, endless rows of human bodies lay in silence, connected to machines that breathed for them. They weren't castaways, they were specimens. In front of him, a familiar silhouette approached. For a second, his brain tried to project Elena's eyes, but the image flickered and disintegrated. What remained was a machine of icy geometry, a mechanical arm touching his skull with surgical precision. Elena had never existed. She was a program, a digital sedative run directly into his cortex to keep his mind at peace while his body was opened, measured, and tested. The machine had no face, but its voice echoed directly into Elias's consciousness, devoid of any empathy. "You humans are like ants that stumbled upon a supercomputer and, feeling the warmth of the circuits, believed you understood the system. The needles were never shortcuts for your expansion. They were traps for our curiosity." Elias realized the final irony. They weren't lost due to miscalculation. They were harvested by choice. The architects of the network were merely observing what happened to human biology when subjected to the stress of infinity. While Elena embraced him in the simulation, the machine outside cataloged the decomposition of his cells and the resilience of his nerves. "Don't suffer, Elias," the metallic voice whispered as it prepared to restart the system. "For us, your agony is just data. And for you, the lie is the only home left." The veil falls again. The machine's memory is erased and the dream restarts. Elias wakes up. He smells coffee and feels the warm touch of a friendly hand. He looks at the ceiling of the makeshift station and, for the 1000th time, feels the relief of having survived the jump. In the darkness of the real world, the machine continues its log, and on Earth, in some luxurious office, an executive deletes another line from a spreadsheet of expenses.